All right, here we are, lawyertalkpodcast.com, law school edition. They don't teach you that in law school edition. And, I'm going to, what we've been doing here, just to give everybody a little bit of background, I have been taking these law students, my law clerk, and we have Bella, and we're going to introduce you guys a little bit more detail because I maybe neglected to do an episode like this. But what we've been doing is we've been taking questions from law students, and then I'm trying to give them a real world application of the issue. So whatever it is. And, I do criminal defense work upstairs at Palmer Legal Defense. So when you do criminal defense, you tend to have, you're in the trenches. I've been in the trenches for almost 30 years. And when I started my career, I took on almost any type of matter you could think of, whether it would be domestic, whether it would be some sort of stupid civil lawsuit against somebody, because I wanted to learn everything there is to learn. And, over the years, you develop a pretty real world approach at these legal issues. And it dawned on me that they don't teach you that stuff in law school. They can't, because a lot of times the professors have never actually done any real world law practice, and that's fine. And it's just the context of law school just doesn't create that. They just don't teach it. It's just not there. But I wanted to take a few minutes today anyway, and at least introduce my law students, introduce you guys. So Troy, first of all, we've got Troy Henriksen. There's no D in there, right?
Nope.
You're not Jimi Hendrickson. You are Troy Henriksen, and you are a law student. Where do you go to law school?
Capital Law School.
And what year are you in?
I'm a 2L, so I went there in, what year is it? 2024. Went there in 2023.
All right. So 2L, this is fancy talk, folks. So these that just means he's in his second year. So 2L meaning law student. So 1L is your first year, 2L is your second year, and 3L, I presume, is your third year.
Yep.
And is there a 4? Hopefully not.
There is, but nobody wants to be. Well, there's some people who take the evening program and then they end up being 4Ls by calendar. But there's some people who do a 3-year program and end up being a 4L. It just, the school's hard.
If you do part-time, you have to do 4 years.
If you're part-time, yeah. So I went to law school at Capital University. It was the Law and Graduate Center back then, and I did it mostly at night, but I finished in 3 years. You were still allowed to do that back then. But look, I want to, why, law school is an interesting, when I started law school, truth be told, I had some interest in being a lawyer, but there wasn't a whole lot of options coming out of a liberal arts school in Ohio with a history degree. I could maybe go try to be a teacher, or I could go to grad school. Those were my options. And I chose law school. But it was cheaper. It was easier financially to deal with that back in those days. So talk to me about the cost and how you fund it.
You want to lead off here?
Well, if Bella's going to start, so Bella, we have Bella, who's also, are you also the 2L?
Yes, I am.
At Capital University?
At Capital, yes.
All right. So tell me what's the cost structure now for law school?
I'm going to be totally honest. My parents do pay for my schooling.
So you're fortunate enough.
I am very blessed.
Nothing to be ashamed of, just thankful.
Yes. So, but I want to say our tuition a year it's a private university, so it might be around like 40.
I think
50?
it's 20,000 and some change a semester, and
per semester, and there's 2 semesters a year, so you're 40 grand a year.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
they do give a lot of money off.
Yeah. So a lot of people start off with scholarships. I start off with a nice one, and there's 2 main ones that they do. There's one where it's like 5 grand off, and another one where it's like 10 grand off. So like when I started, it was
semester?
Per semester, yes.
Okay.
So when I started, my first year was $10,000 each semester.
All right. Well, that's a manageable number.
That's around how mine was.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah. Are you allowed to work your first year in law school? In other words, I know there's a night program.
I think you are.
You're allowed.
I know med school you can't work, and same with dental school, but I'm pretty sure you're allowed to in law school if it fits into your schedule. Yes.
I don't. I think you may not be right about that. At least when I finished, so my first year, I could do. I'm pretty sure either work was discouraged or I wasn't allowed to work at all. But I think by the time I graduated, they weren't letting first years. I don't know how they not let you. I guess if they find out, they kick you out. But I was working anyway. I would go between classes and I would figure out a way to hustle some money.
They strongly discourage it, but it's really hard with how they do the schedule, because it's like, hey, can I work just this 2-hour window during this day and all that? It's a lot harder where you're 2L a year. Like right now, I'm only in class 2 days a week, so it's a lot easier to work because I can go work Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, but I'm also in class Monday, Wednesday for 9 hours. So it's like kind of
like 1L year. We had class 5 days a week.
Yeah.
So it would be hard to keep a job.
It's brutal. And
Mhm.
and it's like you got a deer in the headlights, man. It's like an onslaught of stuff you've never dealt with.
Mhm.
I remember law school. I remember thinking law school is really about you learn a vocabulary first about what is going on and or how's the system works and what's the vocabulary. And once you have the vocabulary, then it starts to click a little bit. But so what kind of hours were you putting in your first year in law school?
I think the rule is you're supposed to do 1 in the classroom, 2 in the afternoon.
Well, I forget about the rule. What's the reality?
So the reality was I didn't do it right at all the first year. And in my head, it was like, I can cram. And when I say cram, usually in undergrad, it was like the night before. But in law school, obviously I gave myself more time. I was like, I can cram the last 3 weeks before exams, flashcards, like doing 12 hours a day, like the minute the library opened to the minute it closed, at a minimum 12 hours. And I could do that for 3 weeks. I thought that was enough. Grades weren't terrible, but I realized that you need to do more spaced repetition on the actual studying and do it all throughout. Like 3 weeks was not enough. So during the first couple of weeks, I wouldn't do honestly a lot of reading or studying on my own time, mostly just the cases, like reading, like I'd watch videos, like Quimby videos on them.
Oh, yeah.
And they like break down the cases really well for you, give you like the
I
whole
never really
day.
thought about that. See, we didn't have that. We had
You need
we had
Quimby
study
in law
aids.
school.
We had Gilbert's and legal lines and maybe some like horn books and stuff that we would have to go read to understand the analysis of the case. But I remember just reading a case and immediately they're using procedural words like mandamus or something. And I have no idea what the hell that word meant. I had to go to my Black's Law Dictionary, look up that word, and then go back. And then I would get to another one. I would do that, and then I would go back. And I just decided that's what I was going to do until it all started to click. And it happened pretty quickly. I mean, once you get into it's like learning a foreign language. Once you sort of catch the routine, you can learn it. You guys both looked at each other like that was crazy. Why would you do something like that?
I give a lot of people who went to law school around your time like a lot of credit because they have a lot of study tools that help us.
Mhm.
So
Well, you have YouTube.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But another thing I just think is crazy is like you've talked about upstairs is like going to the law library and looking up a case. If I didn't have like the databases that we have now, where like I want to focus on just this head note where it's like a Fourth Amendment issue on somebody like getting their car searched, and it'll boom, here's all the cases related to that.
yeah,
Where you actually have to
we
go
use
through.
Lexis.
Mhm.
And they even added this like AI tool in Lexis, which I was kind of surprised because they're so like concerned about everyone using AI in school, but now it makes it so much easier.
Yeah, I mean, Lexis was an AI tool when I started. I mean, that was like the.
Oh, I didn't.
I mean,
Well, I know that.
we didn't use the term AI, but the thought of being able to type into a computer interface and get a search back, I mean, that was like mind blowing at the time. You know, I was in. I think we had an immediate subscription to Westlaw or Lexis or both. I think as law students as soon as it came out, and it might have been like my first or second year. But we still had to learn to go to the library and look up stuff in the decennials. Do you guys even know what those are?
No.
So, so decennials, you would go look up a topic or use West key numbers. So you'd get a topic like search and seizure and it would have a key number. And then you'd go to the West books and they would have key numbers. And then you would get a bunch of blurps on all the cases that match that key number. And then you could start going from there. I mean, it was work. It was legal research. We had to learn how to do it. And to some extent it was better because when you're doing it that way, I don't want to call it better, but it had its benefits, I'll say, because when you do it that way, and Troy, you're sort of learning this a little bit upstairs, when you actually have to read it and then sort of cross-reference something, and it's not just flashing across your screen, you learn it. You actually learn it. You know, the process of doing somehow translates to mastery of the material. And you're sort of doing that by we do an appellate blog upstairs, and he looks at all the cases every week that come out in the Ohio Bar Association. And once you start having to match things up and figure it out, you learn it. And I think to some extent, when I do a search on legal research now on Westlaw or Lexis or whatever I use, it just comes up and, you know, you scan through stuff and it's hard to keep track of it all, but you know, maybe I just am arcane.
No, I mean, that's kind of how like the AI aspect of Lexis kind of feels right now. Especially when we were working up there and we were going over some of the AI summaries and we were catching them like wrong right on the spot. And I was like, this is kind of crazy. They give just very vague cases on an issue that we need something more specific on. And it kind of drives me crazy. I use AI more now on the Lexis to get me in the right direction. because then I
Yeah.
start I gets me to the general case, and then all right, now take me to the citing decisions, and now this is where I can start pinpointing head notes to the cases that actually like pertain closer to ours. And
Yeah.
that's what I like to do on it. And the Green Book does help. The problem with the Green Book is, I want to say like 9 out of 10 of those cases are almost like don't really matter, but when there is one that does matter, it like hits like very hard. Like it
So what
sticks with
you're
me.
talking about, the Green Book, is the Ohio Bar Association publishes. We used to get that book in the mail
Mhm.
every week, and it was like they call them advance sheets or whatever. And you would get a reporter that had all the sort of significant decisions, or the decisions that would be reported, you would get. And I would read the cover of the Green Book, and it would have the case summaries, little blurbs like head notes. And then if you liked what you read, or you wanted to read more, you would open up the book and you would actually read the case. And a lot of lawyers like notoriously have those things stacked in the corners, because eventually you'll get to them. Of course, you never did. But you try now. We keep up with that online. It's just an email that we get. But what he's talking about, Bella, we had a case, and this was one of my first experiences with AI legal research, meaning we just I think we probably just talked into it, or said, hey, tell us what the issue is. We have this. It was a confrontation issue, meaning we were doing an appeal, and the defense was prevented from cross-examining a witness on a certain topic. And Troy spoke in or typed into my AI program what it would be. And it gave us a summary, like a really interesting summary, like the cited case law. I couldn't have written any better. And then I thought, there was in my, I don't know if it was made national news, but in my world, it made some news where some lawyers were sanctioned because they relied on AI, and it was just flat out wrong. I said, well, we better look these cases up.
Right.
It couldn't have been more opposite.
It was crazy.
It absolutely screwed it up.
Wow.
It was just wrong. It was wrong. And I think the other problem I've seen with AI is that, first of all, you don't learn how to write unless you write.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're letting the computer write for you, you're not learning the art of legal writing. And not only the art, like the really artistic form of legal writing, where you turn it into an argument. So it's not just what is being said, but then you turn that into an argument. Like, go read Scalia's decisions out of the U.S. Supreme Court. Like, he could write, or he had people under him that could write, probably both. And if you just rely on AI, you'll never learn that. You just won't. And the other danger of it is, and Troy, you're sort of getting this, when you dig into a case based on the facts that we have in the case that you're reading, you start to see these sort of unwritten parallels. It's like there's a I don't know, there are cosmic connections to things that you can start to draw, or distinctions that you can make, or you can say, all right, well, I know who that guy, I know that court, and I know what was going on there. And I don't think AI really exposes that yet, or reveals that stuff yet.
Yeah.
But it's a tool.
I could see that. Yeah.
It's a tool. But anyway, so back to your first years. I mean, you're spending, did you actually spend 2 hours for every 1 hour?
No.
Crickets.
No.
We get crickets. We get crickets in the very meat.
I kind of
No.
did the same as Troy. I'm really good at cramming and memorizing everything right before an exam. I know it's not the best strategy, but it works well for me. I don't know why. If I try to and I will try to weekly go over my stuff, like what I learned, just to recap it. I don't know if I just have a horrible memory, but it will be out of my brain by the next class. I don't know if we just learn so much in class that I just can't hold it all. But yeah, I'm a lot better at cramming, and I think that works well for me. I wouldn't advise that, though. So
law school, man, it's been a long time since I've talked to people wanting, or in law school, or wanting to go to law school. But it's not about memory. My recollection is that there was a lot of stuff to memorize, but to me, it was learning it. And once you learned it, you don't have to memorize it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it doesn't have to stick on the ceiling very long if you've learned it. Like if you know it, which is really what we're saying is law school is not about memorizing what the law is. It's about learning how everything sort of works, what the arguments are. And there is some law, like in your first year, you learn what a contract is, you learn what a tort is, you learn what, we talked about it last week, you learn what murder is, or the definitions of certain crimes. And I guess there is some memorization there. But I felt like I didn't have to memorize it once I learned how to apply it. Then you just know. And then
Yeah.
you'd be arguing this or you'd be arguing that. A classic law school exam has no right answers, right? Generally, I mean, some professors we used to have multiple guessers Actually, we had one professor. He was great. It was Professor Distelhorst. He's subsequently passed away, but he was phenomenal. And he would have these matching where you actually literally like second grade draw a line to the terms that match, and it was tricky. But most of them were essays where you're given a set of facts and you have to analyze it. And I learned quickly that you just write out a decision like you would read in court. So here's what the facts are. Here's what the one side is arguing. Here's what the other side is arguing. Here's what the legal rule is. There's a minority position to the legal rule. So most people would say that the legal rule is this. Some courts will say that the legal rule is this. And then you just get to pick one. And as long as you support it, you're fine.
Mm-hmm.
And once I caught on to that, then it was easy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel like when we say the cramming and flashcarding, it's not like memorizing the terms. Like the flashcards are a lot more in depth. It'll be, here's just the general term, here's the elements, and here's a flashcard then for like each element arguments.
Like,
and
what are the elements of a tort? Do you know it?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the tort, I guess.
Pick one.
Let's go with,
I got him on the spot.
Let's go with, I feel like assault or battery. It's like there has to be a contact, has to have
a battery. No, there could be, anyway, go ahead.
No, I think is it battery or assault? Assault requires actually physical contact.
Battery requires the contact.
Battery requires the contact. There has to be like an intent. And then it actually has to cause harm. I don't know if it has to be physical or if it has to be like if emotional harm also. But I'm pretty sure there's a fourth one I'm missing there. There's like 4 elements to it. I'm pretty sure.
I thought it was 3.
All right,
is it 3?
So I'm gonna send this episode over to Capital University. We're gonna like, they don't remember.
Melina's gonna like come over there and fight me. I'm like, sorry.
But
sorry.
my point of asking that is that's the crap you got to memorize. Like, you have to memorize what these elements are to some extent, and then be able to apply them to a factual scenario. But the secret is you don't really need to have that stuff memorized beyond law school. You just have to know that you can look up the elements of a civil assault. And then that's where the magic is. You have to be able to craft some theory that fits in the case you're working on. So a contract, for instance, or the negligence claim, duty, breach, causation, damages. Now you sort of know, and then you've got to figure out where the negligence is, what was the duty, and then you can backfill it in. But you can always look up that stuff. You just have to know that you have to look it up, and you have to be able to spot the issues. And that's the trick. So I think what you're talking about is cramming to memorize that kind of crap, because you have to be able to do it to pass the exam, but you don't necessarily have to have that when you finish law school.
I think it's more so like the smaller issues that we have to remember, more so for like Civ Pro.
Yeah.
All those rules we had to memorize, that's where like the flashcards definitely help. But
that feels more like memorization rather than like application, just memorizing the rules.
But I get what you're saying with torts.
Well, the rule, so what's happened it used to be law school was all common law. We talked a little bit about this. You couldn't just look in a book and see what the rules are. It was how we've always done it. So you have to know what the case law is to know what the rules are. And now there's like there's a code or a rule book. You can just look it up. But you have to know that you have to look it up. And if you don't know that there's an issue out there, then you're going to miss it. And rules, and you guys had evidence yet?
No, next semester.
All right. So evidence, when I teach people evidence, I tell them, memorize the freaking rules. Memorize them. Not just what they say, the number and the subsection. Memorize it. Then you can learn them. And then once you learn them, you can learn how to apply them. And once you learn how to apply them, you can learn how to break them and get away with it in a courtroom as a trial lawyer. You've got to learn the rules of evidence. You've got to learn how they fit together. And the only way to do that is just to jump in and start memorizing them. People hate to hear that because it sucks. It's hard work. But there's a few things like that I think you do have to memorize. But anyway, I'm talking and I'm supposed to let you guys talk. So you get done with your first year. What's the second year like?
I think it kind of starts over I want to say it starts in January, your first year. OCIs open up, which is...
What is OCI?
I don't know what the acronym stands for, but it's law firms will come in and do interviews on the campus right there.
On-campus interview.
There we go. Crack the code there.
Right, see?
So you start applying because a lot of people do want to work your first summer, but they also tell you it's optional. There's a lot of people. I'd almost go with, I would say half don't even work their first summer.
I
It's
didn't.
You didn't.
yeah, it's just a lot of them just don't. They tell you it's optional, and a lot of them I talk to, they're like, I just want to take the first summer off. I mean, it's a new experience the whole first year of law school. They want to take a break, and I understand that. But I just feel like I feel like I learned better experience and like actually working at an office. Like I learned a ton this summer that I feel like I gained more this summer than the whole year of law school.
Well, what
pretty much.
you're doing is what we're talking about. You're taking the theoretical approach. I mean, it's really what we're talking about at this podcast. You take the theoretical stuff that you're learning in law school, and then you get to see how it fits into the world, how it fits into the actual world with real cases and a real business. Because, I can't afford all this fancy AI stuff in a small law practice. I have to do it ad hoc when I need it. And, and that is my beef with Lexis Westlaw is they give it to you for free. It's like look, no secret what I do for a living. I represent people charged with crimes. Lots of those, at least it used to be, lots of those were dope dealers. And the first thing a dope dealer does, it gives you your first hit for free. All right. So you get you addicted. So you get your first hit free of Lexis and Westlaw with all the bells and whistles. That would be like $1,500 a month, what you guys get for free.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know it was that much.
Maybe less, but I think $1,000 a month.
Wow.
For the full array of those products. It's insane. It is insane. And they have small law firm deals, but it's not anything close to what you're getting. So, but so you work at, what did I do after my first, I did work after my first year. I had buddies that were just got landscaping jobs or whatever. I had buddies that didn't need to work for whatever reason. So they didn't, I guess it all depends. But the second year, they used to say the first year they scare you to death. The second year they work you to death. Does that still hold true?
I would kind of agree with that because I feel like the bar classes your first year are not the hard ones. It's more like introduction. But then the second year, I feel like all the bar classes we take are the hardest ones because they figured out, you know what you're doing here to some extent. So now we're going to give you the spice and we're going to see if you can handle the spice. Yeah. At the same time, a lot of people are now in work. So I feel like a lot of these people are working for the first time in their lives. They've never had a job. And now they have to juggle the spiciest bar classes while maintaining a job. And it's kind of like it's just a whole new shock again for them. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like everyone was saying like, you just got to get through 1L year. Now all I'm hearing is 2L year. And I definitely think 2L year is a lot harder than
it's harder.
1L year. I think so. I think our midterms, or we're in some different classes, but I felt like my midterms, all the information on it was like what would have been on the final last year. Mm-hmm. It's just they give you like double the workload.
So it's harder, meaning you're working harder.
Yeah, the material itself isn't necessarily like harder to understand, but the workload is definitely a lot more.
Presumably by your second year, you already know the vocabulary. Mm-hmm. So when somebody's talking about, look, they don't teach us this stuff in undergrad, let alone half the time in law school. Like you walk into this with no understanding of the legal system. And I remember I I couldn't articulate the difference between suing somebody in a criminal case. Like I didn't know a plaintiff, defendant, what's a defendant, who's in, you don't know those simple things when you when you start law school. So it's scary. It's like you're just thrown into this world with a different vocabulary, a different language, and you're expected to know it. And then do they still make you stand up and answer questions and recite stuff, pick on you?
Yeah.
They don't make a stand.
We don't have to stand, but we do get
We didn't either, but some, in the old days they did. So it's scary. Mm-hmm. You're on the spot, you're scared, you don't know what the hell you're talking about, and you get exposed and you feel stupid. And, all the emotions were there, but it sounds like it is true. And then the second year they're just working you to death.
Mm-hmm.
The whole picking the name, some of them is kind of fun. It's kind of like a roulette. They have like a little deck of flashcards with your name, and you just see them flip up there. All of a sudden, they're like, all right, Troy. Like, oh shoot, now I'm on the spot for the whole class. Here we go. And so it's a nice little surprise.
I feel like everyone's nervous about that going into law school. Whenever people ask me about law school, that's like the number one thing they think of is the cold calling. You get used to it.
Yeah.
Like I'm not really. Everyone's like messed up a cold call.
Yeah, it's happened. Yeah.
It's really not embarrassing. Everyone's in the same boat.
It's part of the education.
I understand why they do it. Yeah, it makes sense.
But this is it. I mean, they're not doing it. I'm glad to hear that it's still happening, because I think for a while it was unpopular because we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or embarrass anybody or do whatever. But it's part of the education, and it teaches you how to think on your feet. It teaches you how to answer questions when you have no idea what the answers are. and then use your deductive reasoning to get through it. Or it teaches you how to say, I just don't know what the hell I'm talking about. And there's a lesson there too. I think that is a valuable part of the education. They call it the Socratic method because it is designed to get you, the student, to find the answer on your own through probing questions. That's what Socrates did. If you go read his dialogues, that's where it comes from. So, or Plato's dialogues talking about his conversations with Socrates. But that is, there's some value in that. And it uses that muscle in your brain that you would never use otherwise. Not in med school, not in MBA school, nowhere else are you trained to exercise that muscle and develop it, to deduce things that you otherwise would have no idea about just by a question that's asked you. I mean, it's sort of they give you they breadcrumb it all the way to the end, and it really creates you're gonna leave law school with those tools and those foundations that you can apply everywhere. My dad was a law professor. He used to say it's the best education around because as a lawyer, I can do what you're doing. Maybe not as well, Mr. MBA. Maybe not as well, Mr. Accountant. I can do what you're doing, but you can't do what I'm doing because you have to go get a law degree. You have to pass. And I guess for an accountant, you have to do that still too. But I talk to my accountant all the time on his level, but he can't do it on my level. And I'm not saying my level's superior. I don't mean that. Just we learned a way to think and a way to learn that he didn't have to learn. So now you guys are what, halfway through your second years?
Yes.
What classes you taking?
We're in constitutional law, civil procedure. I'm in business associations. You're not.
I'm not in business associations. I came to the conclusion I'm not taking that either. It's not mandatory this anymore.
So hard.
Yeah.
BA is hard.
It is. I don't know if it's because I have never taken a business class in my entire life.
So it's just like
It
corporations
Yeah, pretty much. Well,
and shareholder suits
yeah.
The ultra vires doctrine.
Yes, we did learn that. Yes.
Yeah.
It's the hardest class I've ever taken in my entire life.
Piercing the corporate veil.
Yes, that was traumatizing. No, just kidding. But yeah, it is really, really hard. I think I just don't have a business background at all. There's like guys in the class who were like business majors in undergrad, and I like didn't even know what equity was like going into this class. So yeah, it was definitely rough, but we're getting through it. So.
Equity is such a ubiquitous term in law. So, we hear it. It's been, people throw around equity in a political sense, like we're going to go give equity, making everybody equal, and, to call DEI stuff equity. And then there's equity in a company.
Yeah, that's
what you're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about.
Like I have an interest. I have a shareholder interest in a company. I hold equity in the company. And then there's equity like in justice, meaning like specific enforcement of a contract versus just paying off damages. So, be careful with that term is what I'm saying. It's a term of art that applies in different ways. So constitutional law, I think if they taught that class to everybody in undergrad, I don't think you could teach it like making people read Supreme Court cases, but you could teach con law in I don't want to say dumbed down, in a non-law school setting. I think our entire society would be better because it gives you the history and context of everything that happens in our country. And frankly, what makes our country awesome is because you learn the Constitution, you learn the separation of powers, you learn judicial review and what the government is trying to do and what it can't do. And there's awesome political stories behind it all. But I'm going to ask you, I mean, but is it a whole year class, right? Con law?
What was it?
Con law or constitutional law is an entire year?
Yes. Well,
yes.
Yeah,
it
is. You take con law 1 and then con law 2, but yeah.
All right. So what are your thoughts on it? I mean, it was my favorite class, one of them anyway. I hated the professor, but it was one of my favorite topics to learn.
I think I'll have to agree with you. I don't hate our professor. It's just if they had to put the most monotone, boring, I don't want to dog on him too bad now, man.
He's
it's just
a really great guy. He's really sweet.
Yes. That is
all
good.
Right. So look, you just put your con law professor in the friend zone.
How you would picture a law?
Oh, he's really sweet. I don't like him, but he's really sweet. I would never date him.
I mean, like if he was like, if do you guys want to get a beer or something? I'd be like, oh yeah, sure. Do you want me to teach you constitutional law? I'd be like, whoa, hold on. Like, no, I prefer not actually. So that's where I would draw the line.
You could make that class awesome.
You
Go
could.
watch a YouTube video on Marbury versus Madison. I mean, just
This is
read the
first
history.
case we read.
Mm.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it really fascinating history behind the scenes on that. So you
Quim-
can make it really cool.
Quimby does a great job on all of them. I love
What
it.
is Quimby?
So,
Quimby's amazing.
so Quimby is like, imagine it's YouTube, okay, but it's just for law cases. That's it. It's totally tailored completely to that. I pay for it. It's like $30 a month.
Best
and
$30 of my life.
Yeah, it's amazing. So when I go to a case, like I'll type in Marbury v. Madison, and it brings up a video. You can watch 10-minute video on it. It has the holding, it has the legal question, it has the fact pattern.
Does it
has
have the history behind it, like the Midnight Judges?
Yeah, it has all that. It goes through everything for you.
And it gets like right to the point, like what
Mhm.
you're trying to get from the case.
Mhm.
And it puts videos up there, and it's like animated videos. It puts it into like simple terms, like
Yeah.
very, very simple. It's
Well, see, that's good. But, but here's the thing. You're depriving yourselves of the opportunity to learn how to. One of my mottos is I like to make things simple, and almost everything can be made simple. But it's a skill you have to learn. You have to learn that skill to take that complex crap and then simplify it. You see me do it upstairs all the time. You'll give me this case, all these facts. And I was like, all right, here's what's really going on. Here's what's happened behind the scenes. Let's simplify this and make it so it's understandable.
Mhm.
And I think a skill that you guys are developing and will eventually master, I hope, is that you can speak both languages. You want to learn to speak both languages. And there's too many people in law school, and there's too many people in med school, too many accountants, too many other sort of trained, quote, professionals. And I say that with in the most self-deprecating way, because I think it's a bunch of BS. You have to be able to speak both languages, because there's nothing more arrogantly ignorant than a lawyer who uses a bunch of legalese talking to people. I find it just reprehensibly offensive. It just elitistly offensive. So I think a skill set that I would encourage you guys to master is to take the complexities of Marbury versus Madison or any of these other cases, and then be able to break it down and make it simple so anybody can understand it. And if you can do that, you will be a successful lawyer. And not just because you'll be a good lawyer, you will be, but because you'll be a good business. And you, Troy, you see me talk to clients. It's not just that it's that I really believe it is reprehensible to talk to people with a language they don't understand. Because you're just, people who do that, you're just doing it to make yourself feel like you're smarter than everybody in the room. And that is nonsense.
Mhm.
Because a lot of the people you'll talk to who aren't lawyers, they know how to build an entire house, or they know how to plumb an entire house. And if you think it's easy to plumb a house, go read the regulations on that. As a lawyer, it's difficult to understand I'm working on a house right now, and I got a guy who knows how to plumb. He's like, look, you got to understand, you got to have a sanitary tee instead of a regular tee. And it's got to be at this thing. It's got to be this. You have to have a vent within this many of this.
Yeah,
It's like,
no, I
these
bet.
people are smart people. Just so to use legalese to them to make them feel like they're not is really what I'm talking about. But beyond that, if you can get your point across without legalese, you can go talk to a jury. So you can take this complicated crap and then you can talk to a jury about it and explain to them what your position is and what your client's position is in a way that doesn't require them to have to look up at you in this haughty type fashion. So anyway, that's my rant on legalese. And law professors do it all the time, because they live in that world and they love making you guys feel small. A lot of them do. Not all, but a lot of them do. So your Quimby worries me a little bit, in other words.
I do think you need to like read the cases along with it. It definitely helps, but the professors will be able to tell if you like got everything just from the video.
A lot
They
of
would
them,
be able to pick up on that. So I would definitely like read the cases along with
a
it.
lot of them will ask for the fact pattern, and I'll sometimes laugh in class because I'll have it up just in case you're asking me like a question or something, and I'll listen to them and they'll be reading the
Literally.
Quimby fact pattern
Yeah.
word for word, and I'll be like, wow,
Yeah.
I wonder
Yeah,
what
we
he
all have, like, the
subscribes
same
to.
thing.
Like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
So I do agree. Reading the case does help because
Yeah.
a lot of the professors, they can tell, and then
They'll ask you like little details about it, and
Yeah.
everyone's like,
and you're like, ooh,
yeah.
let me go
So
into that.
the skill to be able to say, here's what's going on in this case. You got two people who were drinking at a bar and they were talking about this real estate deal and they got drunk and they decided that they were going to sell this property, but they wanted to write it down and they wanted to have some sort of contract. So they wrote it down on a napkin while they were drinking. And, it's like, if you can tell that story in a way that isn't like Quimbyized, you're going to be successful. So it's like, yeah, these two people got drunk in a bar and they were talking and they were friends before, but they weren't friends after this. And they started to decide, I'm going to buy your land from you. And one was as high as the Georgia Pines, as the case would say. I'm talking about, I think it was Lucy versus Zamer. It's one of your first year contract classes.
It is a contract. That sounds right. I
it's-
mean, you
it-
get the fact pattern totally right.
It's right. Yeah, it's right. And it was down in Georgia. It's as tall as the Georgia Pines, or he's as high as the Georgia Pines. They were drunk. So the issue in that case was whether there was an actual contract because somebody was too drunk to actually enter into a contractual relationship. So, but if you can tell that story in a way that is beyond rote, in other words, not just what Quinby says, and put a little color to it, it makes you a better lawyer. So that's how you get A's in law school. And the other way you get A's in law school, here's my other tip in law school. How do you get A's? You got to know all this stuff and then you cite the cases. Well, the professor said we don't need to know the case names. Yeah, but if you do, and nobody else does, you'll get the A, as long as you got the rest of it right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I learned the case names. I probably still remember them. Well, Lucy versus Amer was one. I'm starting to. Hadley versus Baxendale was another contracts case. That was like a windmill, something or other.
Windmills?
Somebody was selling a windmill to somebody else or windmill parts to somebody else. And the issue was, what was the natural consequences of the breach of contract? It was about damages.
I feel like probably 80% of all contracts class cases are construction contracts, just subcontractors
a lot of
issues with
them
them.
are.
That's almost all it is. And I tell my buddies that are in construction management, and then I'm like, you guys should go to law school because you guys would be able to pick this apart. Like all this contract law stuff, like that is all we learned about is your guys' field. That is it.
Yeah,
And
there's a lot of those.
It was.
And that's what I imagine most modern day, the most, I guess, exciting modern day contract disputes are going to be on is with subcontractors trying to do big projects through contract companies pretty much.
Well, there's a lot of them.
Mhm.
Every car deal has a contract. Every time you buy a house is a contract. Every time you hire a contractor to work on your house, there's a contract. If you buy every time you buy something from the store, it's a contract. It's like there's a meeting of the minds. There's consideration. You've got a contract. So all these things are great. I mean, it makes you look at the world differently. But anyway, back to the point. It's like this Quimby is awesome, but please learn how to do this on your own. It's so much better. You'll be so far ahead of the game. Although I get it. So what is you guys haven't had to study for the bar exam yet, but I'll share with you how I did it when we get to that. But so what is and I learned it studying for exams. So if you've got an exam, you're talking about cramming, how do you do it? Like you've got con law coming up in 3 weeks, you're going to have an exam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how are you going to study for that?
Con law is a little different because we really just do Supreme Court cases. So I think reviewing the cases would be most helpful in that class. But Civ Pro, I like using flashcards.
Yeah. It's
learn the rules and learn what you got. So Civ Pro, your first year, you got subject matter jurisdiction. You've got diversity of citizenship. You've got.
Well, that's what we're doing right now. We did the rules our first year. It is kind of backwards. I feel like other law schools do it the other way around, but we're doing like subject matter jurisdiction and all that right now.
It's hard. Subject matter jurisdiction is difficult.
And in her class, she gives us a lot of like worksheets and stuff in class. So before the exam, I'll always redo those and check with her usually.
So constitutional law, you need to know how it works. You need to know how judicial review works and understand the levers of power that each branch of government has. So you're going to be presented with questions. You're going to have to spot the issues, and you're going to have to be able to explain how it all fits together. What's the issue? Is there authority for Congress to pass this law, and what is it? Then you get into things like probably second semester you get into freedom of speech and that kind of crap, I would think, or the Bill of Rights. But the first semester is all about understanding how government works, how the process works. So you have to understand the process of judicial review. Does Congress have the authority to act? Does Congress not have the authority to act? Why not? Preemption. Have you done that yet?
Yeah, we did.
All right. So you'll get a question with a fact pattern. You're going to say the real issue here is whether the federal government has preempted the field. It's like, so you have to understand that stuff. And I'm telling you, if you can cite the cases, yeah,
he would love that.
Yeah.
You're going to get the A. You got to be right about the other stuff, but you're going to get the A. So memorize the cases.
Yeah.
That's
memorize them. You'll be so far ahead. And there's just nothing, there's no better way to do it. And then the other thing that I used to do is I would start. See, we didn't have Quimby. We had Gilbert's. It was like an outline that was a thick sort of spiral bound book, and it was an outline. And I'll just share I didn't do anything in law school, or hardly anything at first. I mean, at first I learned all the language. Then I've got ADHD and I tend to blow stuff off. And I would even forget what we even covered. So I had to look at like the table of contents in the case book, and I would take a horn book and I'd go back and I'd just learn it all. I would just learn it all. I'd start at the beginning of the horn book and I would start outlining I'd create my own outline of the horn book or Gilbert's or whatever. And then I would reduce it, and then I would reduce it, and then I would reduce it till it was just like one page of topics. And I had it memorized by the end of that. Now, it was nauseatingly painful to do that. But if you do that, you will learn it. You will learn it and you will never forget it. And as you reduce it, write down the case names of the big picture cases that you know you're going to get asked on. And once you do that, you will know the material, because you have taken it, you have simplified it on your own to a shorter version several times. In the process of doing that, you learn it. It's like the old, like when people used to cheat in school, they would write out their own little crib sheet that they would hide wherever, and they would have a cheat sheet on their hand or whatever. In order to fit all the material on their hand, they had to start with something a lot longer, and then they would only put the stuff they actually needed to memorize on their hand. By the time they got that, they never had to look at it, because the process of creating your cheat sheet, you've learned it. And that's the trick to memorizing vast amounts of material. And there's only one good way to do it, and that's just do the hard work.
Yeah.
In con law, we could actually use our outline on the final.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of classes like that, but you got to create an outline. And if you don't create the outline, you don't learn it. And that's just it. So if I gave you my outline, probably still could dig them up somewhere and I could give it to you, and you would be like, this makes no sense. Because to me, it was reduced down to like simple terms. But all right, so now you're going to finish your second years in law school, and one of the questions, I'm going to shift gears here, because one of the questions I had in my Q&A series, you guys were here when I answered it, which is somebody was talking about how to get into election law or political election law or something, which is like a bigger picture question. Like I hear people all the time say, I'm going to be a corporate lawyer, or I'm going to be a civil rights lawyer, or I'm going to be whatever. And I always sort of think, yeah, okay. Like, now it's possible. Like if my boys went to law school and they say, I'm going to be a criminal defense lawyer. Well, that has a path in front of them, because that's what I do. I could hire them and they could learn this. But generally speaking, what is the thought process for people looking for jobs and trying to specialize and do different things? Is that anybody talking about that yet?
I think people are starting to care a lot more about it. I think the big time it'll click will be this January, probably, because people will realize that like they need to get a job for the second summer, probably. The school really does not shove it down your throat whatsoever, which is kind of shocking. I think the big thing that they want is to make sure you can actually pass the bar.
They want to pass the bar because it helps their credentials and it helps their stats.
But also,
rightfully so.
Yeah. And also, though, like a lot of people, it shocks when people talk to me about this. They're like, what's your focus in law school? Like, what are you studying? I'm like, in law school, there's not a focus.
You mean
yet.
Other people who aren't in law school?
Yeah.
Right.
And then I'm like, it's just general. We're just there to
like, what's your major?
Yeah.
Right,
Yes.
yeah.
It's what's your majors? And it's like, no, there's no majors. We're just pretty much there to pass the bar. That's our job. And then it's just kind of, I'm trying to think. I lost my point there. What are we talking about? Bar?
Well, we're talking about what's your specialty, what you want to go, or what you want to go into.
Yeah.
So your third year, you can get some electives.
Yeah. We start that a little bit this year, which is nice. Like I'm in a family law drafting class, which I find interesting. But personally, I don't know exactly what I want to go into. There's a few topics that I'm interested in, but I kind of feel like that's like the bulk of our class, to be honest. I don't think everyone really has a set plan. I know you really like criminal law, and that's probably what you're going to do. But yeah.
And I know there's also a lot of people who, this blows a lot of people's mind too, when I tell them this is, they're like, they're not going to take the bar. There's like a lot of people who are like, I'm there to get my JD. I'm not taking the bar.
Yeah.
And it just kind of
interesting.
Yeah. Because in my head, I'm like, why don't you just try? What if you just don't
you
even?
Might as well.
Yeah. Like, what do you got to lose other than just
you should credential yourself, because your best chance of passing the bar exam is now.
Yeah.
I don't think if I went and sat for the bar exam cold, I bet you I couldn't pass it right now.
I bet you could.
I don't think so. The multi-state bar exam is just wrought with all sorts of multiple choice questions that you have to have. Like you have to study to understand the
Mhm.
best way to take that test and pass it. So I mean, I might be able to pass the essays, maybe, probably not. I mean, there was maybe 10 years ago I could, but now it's like, I've sort of lost all the stuff you know right now. You'll take for granted how much you know right now when you're done with law school.
Yeah. They're actually changing the bar for us.
Yeah.
We're going to be the first class to take the new bar.
What is the new bar?
It's supposed to be a little easier.
Yeah,
I think they took some topics off it and it's a little shorter.
I think they took like business administration's like off there, and then also family law is off, and then
trusts
estates
and
and
wills.
yeah,
or something.
all that's
Really?
off there. Yeah.
I was kind of surprised because I feel like those topics are pretty common.
So
Yeah.
I don't agree with any of that, frankly. And the reason is this: is that even in like take a criminal law practice, we encounter all those issues day in and day out. Maybe not every day, I guess that might be an overstatement, but it's very common. I'll get some issue that has to do with a will or trust
Yeah.
that is now in the criminal realm. And if you don't have the basic understanding of how that stuff works, then you're behind. You're behind. I believe everybody their first year out of, like, if I'm in a general practice, I took what I could because I wanted to learn how to do a divorce. I'm not good at it, but I could do it. I could monkey through it. I could make a will. And at least back then, now I know who to call to make a will. But it's like, I think it's important to have that baseline understanding so you have the terminology. We deal with civil cases all the time that are corollary to criminal cases. I'm doing it right now. I've got a conference call this afternoon on a case that my client could have been, it was a murder investigation, could have been charged with murder. Now there's a civil lawsuit. And I've got to refer the matter and go speak intelligently with a group of haughty civil lawyers who get paid lots of money by their law firms. And I can swim in that pond because I learned this stuff. And if you don't learn this stuff, I think you're at a disadvantage. So I don't agree with that. Anyway, that's
That's fair.
my 2 cents on
Yeah.
it. Let him call me and talk about the law
Yeah.
exam next time. I'll take care of it. So back to the question. What do you want? So you want to be a criminal lawyer?
That's the goal. Hopefully, criminal defense. That's why I decided.
Bella?
Okay, here.
And yeah, like I said, I'm not positive yet. I am interested in a few different areas. I do like family law. I am very into politics, but like you said, it is kind of hard to really.
You got to find, so but I think what you're really asking, how do you get into political law, or is there such a
Right.
thing? And, if you've got the wherewithal to go explore special interest groups, there's a lot of nonprofits that do that kind of stuff. There are some law firms that do that. The big law firms all have some division that'll do these weird specialties. So most people find their specialty either based on what I talked about Uncle Bob, and I don't know if that was this podcast or a different one, but if your Uncle Bob has this business and Bob's business is importing clothing from China and then sorting it out. I had a case like this one time, believe it or not. This guy imported clothing was made in China. It would all get shipped to this guy's warehouse. And what he would do is he would take a representative sample and inspect the boxes, open the boxes and inspect them. And if there were X number out of the box that were screwed up or blemishes, then the whole thing would get sort of shipped off. And I guess then my client's job was to then take the entire shipment that has now been deemed undeliverable. And he would then go through and pick out the ones that are really bad and then resell the ones that are good. And that they would go to places like Schottenstein's or the second run clothing stores, which are perfectly fine. They had to be picked through a couple times. He had that business, a weird little business. All right. So you could become a specialty in that kind of import, export, textiles or whatever really quickly just because that's your first client. Fair enough. Or if you go to a law firm, one of these big law firms doing on-campus interviews, you would be, they say, look, we'll hire you. You'll be we'll hire you. You get your summer clerkship at one of the big law firms, and we're going to put you under partner Joe over there or Jill over here, and they do contracts work. So now you're going to be a contracts lawyer, or you're going to be in their real estate division, or you're going to be in their Medicaid division or government compliance division, where you're going to learn all sorts of nuances about that area of the law, and you become a specialist in that area. It's your first job. That's how you get a legal specialty. You don't pick a major, usually speaking, or generally speaking.
The OCIs aren't all just big law. I think there was really only like 2 big laws there, and then there's public defenders and
Mhm.
prosecutors office there. But then there's a lot of like small firms that
Mhm.
come in there and they're just trying to recruit one person, and they'll get like, 50 applications that way, and they can burn through them all in one day of interviews with everybody. So it's kind of interesting how they organize it.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's how I
Hmm.
found various times I've had maybe like 5 associates working under me, and I found them all the same way. Just law clerks and just bring them up through the ranks.
Mhm.
And it works. I mean, it's a great way for you guys to learn. And then I train my associate who does it my way from the outset. And then I don't have to worry about somebody else screwing it up. So anyway, this is, I guess we didn't do a normal, they don't teach you that in law school, but I think this was helpful for me to understand where you guys are. So you're going to be coming out of law school, looking for your first jobs, and taking on the world with your law degrees. Any last comments for those who are thinking about law school?
My advice would be don't let anyone scare you. I feel like going into law school, everyone was like, oh, good luck. Like it's so hard and stuff. It is challenging and it's very time consuming, but you could definitely do it. It's manageable. So I wouldn't get discouraged. That would be my advice.
They did recommend not working your first year, and I said no, I'm better than that. I can work my first year, and that was brutal. I got like no sleep. So
Yeah, but you did it.
Yeah, I did.
And you passed.
Yes.
You know how often somebody's asked me for what my GPA was in law school?
Never.
Never.
Yeah.
Never. Nobody cares.
Right.
Or I mean, unless it's like in a social setting where I'm like talking to a prosecutor yesterday who was about she was 10 years after me, maybe 10 a little bit, but I was just asking her as a social matter, like as a courtesy, like, oh, where'd you go to undergrad, where'd you go to law school? But it's like I had no judgment about it. It doesn't nobody cares. Nobody cares. Oh, you went to Harvard. Now now that stuff matters. Big law schools matter in this sense, is that you're going to have certain advantages when you get out just by virtue of the network. But they teach the same law. They teach from the same books. Now, you might end up with, you also have to understand that law school is curved. In other words, it's not like, it's somewhat subjective, really. I was graded anyway based on how I compared to everybody else. So, it's a curve. So if I did better than you, I got a better grade than you by judgment of the professor. So that wasn't really objective as much as it was a subjective curve. And if you get to if you surround yourself with really, 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 really smart people, don't expect to get a better grade necessarily because it's, you know the law, but they can articulate it better. They're going to get a better grade. So there's some of that going on at the bigger, more prestigious law schools. But I got the same education everybody else got at Capital, just like you guys are getting.
We're in Columbus, where everybody I talked to outside of law school or outside the law community, they're like, oh, you go to the Capitol. Like every lawyer they know in town went to Capitol pretty much. And
I don't, man's law school, man.
Yeah.
And you know why you go to Capitol? This is the old joke. Because you can get in at Ohio State.
We get that a lot.
Yeah.
That's why I went, right?
I didn't
and I could do it at night. So Capitol is a play. It's unique in that way. You can do a night program to pay for it. And you get a lot of guys, a lot of gals at Capitol who have families or it's their second career and they're picking up their JD at night, which, that is a really unique thing that has a lot of value, I think.
A really unique program that I looked into before going to Capitol was at Loyola, I think, in Chicago, was they have a weekend program where you do 1 week in a month online, 1 week in a month in person, because you have to do so much in person. I don't know why the bar has that rule. They don't.
There's accreditation standards for.
Yeah. And it was like, I was like, that's a really cool program. 4 years.
That's a really good way not to learn the law.
I know, but I in my head, I was like, wow, this is something that could really work with a full-time working schedule.
That's right.
And that's why I was like I was trying to figure out that.
And those guys are generally, those people, not just guys, those people are better law students. They've been in the real world. They're choosing to go to law school, not just as something else to do. And they're going to really devote their time and energy to excel at it. So a lot of those programs are filled with people like that who are more responsible adults by the time they're going to law school. So, all right. Any last questions? anything they don't teach you in law school, actually, it's not just now. Next week will be another chance. So
Mhm.
anyway, this has been Lawyer Talk Off the Record on the air. They don't teach you that in law school, but a little different take on it. Hope you enjoyed it. If you've got a question, you got a topic, if you're a law student and you want to chime in on any of these, check us out, put it in the comments, send us a question at lawyertalkpodcast.com. But if I don't hear from you, guess what? I'll be back anyway, each and every week, at least until now. Hey, Steve Palmer here from Lawyer Talk. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Check us out, all our social media. Like, share, interact, ask your own questions. We're here for you.